Well, welcome back. There is some good news for international students looking to get back to New South Wales. A pilot plan has been given the green light. Let's go live now to the Minister for Jobs, Investment and Tourism, Stuart Ayres. Good to see you. There's so many international students just waiting to hear. So what is the plan, Stuart Ayres?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. It's really great to talk to you about this. International students are really dynamic and important part of the New South Wales economy. They contribute, in fact, international education contributes about $14 billion to the New South Wales economy. So it's really great to be announcing that we're going to pilot the return of international students in December. We're launching an expressions of interest for international students who are currently offshore and want to come back into Australia. Off the back of that expressions of interest, we'll then work with universities and education providers about identifying where our first few flights will go to charter those students back in. And then when they're here in Sydney, they'll be doing their quarantine through purpose-built student accommodation. We've partnered with one of the providers here in Sydney, Scape, to set up a building that's been assessed by New South Wales Health and New South Wales Police to ensure those students get to come back through a safe quarantine environment and get set up to get back onto campus.
Well, look, we're going to reach 70% in a matter of weeks, double vaccinated in when we're looking at 80%, that'll be in November, but you're not even looking to a pilot program of a minimal number of students until December. Why?
Well, I think it will take a little bit of time to get all the students identified. It also allows us to work with the universities around chartering flights. We know that flight access to Sydney, because of their capped environment, is still compromised. So that makes it difficult for students to be able to make plans. So this pilot is as much about ensuring that we get the logistics right to get them in. We know that our hotel quarantine environment is pretty dynamic. We've already announced here in New South Wales our home quarantine trial. The Commonwealth Government is making really strong and positive overtones around getting more Australians back as we get towards the end of the year. So I think that's going to continue to evolve. This is about making sure that we put a really solid marker in the ground. We say to those international students who are in markets offshore that we're reopening. We're going to start, it is a bit slow and steady just to make sure that we get all of those quarantine and vaccination protocols right. Requirement for participating in this pilot is that you will need to be double vaccinated with a TGA recognised vaccine. So we just want to shore up all of those things. We also want to make sure that this is a good experience for those students coming back into Australia. It's a crucial market for us. Like I said before, they generate a lot of economic activity, but they add so much to our community as well. So it's not just about all on the economic side. We want to make sure we support these students back into Australia, make sure we've got quarantine protocols in place. And then as we move through what will be no doubt a dynamic environment, Laura, between now and the end of the year and the first quarter of next year, that international students are constantly part of our thinking in that as well.
Yeah, I know, and it's a big, I know you to say it's not about numbers, but in New South Wales, international tourism is, international students are worth more than tourism. So the makeup is a little bit different in states like Queensland, for example. So I know you're very exercised on this issue, but if you're looking at a pilot program in December and the first semester of university starting in 2022, is the timing to get back to some kind of normality and 100% capacity likely to start university next year?
Well, I think like everything in the reopening arrangements for COVID, it is incremental, whether it's testing, home quarantine trialling for returning Australians or setting up a pilot for international students. I think the key message here is that we're out of the barriers. We're really having a crack at making sure we get these things right. We know there's going to be a lot of demand over time for international students and Australians returning home. So we just want to make sure that we get the systems in place and we can do that properly. The last thing we want to do is overwhelm, whether it be universities or health or police, with a flood of people trying to get back into Australia and not having those operational requirements already in place, ready to go, so that we can support, particularly in this case, international students properly. I think if we get good solid learnings out of the pilot, we can then scale that up relatively quickly. We know that we've got lots of purpose-built student accommodation options already in Sydney. They were full pre-COVID and we'd love to see them full again. It is baby steps at this stage, but I think my message to everyone is that if we get this pilot right, we should be able to scale that up relatively quickly. And whilst it will take time to return back to the full quantum of international students, we want to make sure that we at least start that process, take learnings along the way, and communicate really clearly to the international student market that we want those students coming back into Australia before they make a decision to go and choose to study in another location around the world.
All right, just quickly, are you going to make them pay for these charter flights, and what countries are we talking about that are going to be first cab off the rank, if you like?
Yeah, I might do those in reverse order. So the expressions of interest process will really determine where the charter flights go. And the charter flights and accommodation arrangements are being shared by students as well as universities. So this is a shared model. The universities and education providers know that they've probably got to offset some of these costs to get this started again. So they're taking on some of those risks. The government is here to support them through the course of that, particularly around logistical support. We'll definitely engage with a lot of our offshore offices, particularly through Austrade and DFAT in markets right across the globe. But it'll really be the expressions of interest that come from the students themselves that will determine where the first flights go to.
Okay, but you're not ruling out Indian students?
No, the focal point here, the baseline for acceptance will be ensuring that you've got a TGA recognised vaccine. In the case of India, they've got a vaccine called COVID Shield. It's AstraZeneca. So students that have had that vaccine will meet those TGA requirements. So India is definitely an option, but there are lots of other markets around the world. As you said before, lots of international students have studied traditionally in New South Wales. It is our state's largest service export. And so it's, I think, a great opportunity for those students to express their interest to come back. And where we can shore up those flights with solid numbers through the expressions of interest, that's where we'll be sending the planes in supporting the universities.
Okay, Stuart Ayres, thanks so much for that. We'll keep in touch. That pilot program looking like getting underway with 650 students in December. We will speak to you soon.